Like a line of dominoes, one conflict often tips into the next, each one creating the conditions for the one that follows. The 100 Years' War between England and France was one such catalyst, a century-long struggle that rippled across Europe, even sparking a civil war within England itself, the Wars of the Roses. Before we delve into this bloody dynastic struggle, we'd like to thank our sponsor, 3histories channel. If you've ever dreamed of leading armies in epic medieval battles, this is the game for you. It's a free-to-play tactical MMO on PC where you create your own warlord, command over 55 unique units, and forge an empire. And things are about to get even more exciting. On December 19th, the Mongol-inspired Sons of the Steppes update arrives, bringing new units, a battle pass with awesome nomadic-themed cosmetics, and fresh challenges. You'll also get to fight on 3 new battlefields and enjoy improved matchmaking and ranking systems. If you register using the link in our description, you'll receive 10 instant gifts to kickstart your campaign, including a gold helmet, XP cards for your hero and units, and 3 Hwacha arrow launchers. Support our channel and conquer the battlefield. Now back to the roots of conflict. To understand the Wars of the Roses, we must go back to King Edward III. He had 5 surviving sons, whom he made England's first dukes, granting them immense lands and power. While this initially strengthened the crown, it also created a new problem, a powerful nobility with potential claims to the throne. The dominoes began to fall when Edward's heir, the Black Prince, died in 1376, followed by the king himself a year later. This left the throne to Richard II, whose reign was anything but stable. He faced the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, a parliamentary crisis, and growing opposition from his nobles. His attempts to make peace with France and his childless marriage only eroded his support further. In 1398, he exiled his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke. It was a fatal mistake. Henry returned in 1399, not as a supplicant, but as a conqueror. He deposed Richard and had himself crowned Henry IV, bypassing another claimant, Edmund Mortimer, and setting the stage for decades of rebellion. His son Henry V brought a brief period of glory with his legendary victory at Agincourt in 1415. The subsequent Treaty of Troyes even seemed to promise the English crown the throne of France. But fate had other plans. In 1422, both Henry V and the French king, Charles VI, died, leaving the infant Henry VI as king of 2 realms. England's fortunes in France soon crumbled. With his uncles Bedford and Gloucester acting as regents, the young king's hold was tenuous. The French, inspired by Joan of Arc, rallied and crowned their own king, Charles VII, steadily pushing the English out. By the time Henry II came of age in 1437, he was a weak and indecisive ruler. His court split into 2 factions, a peace party led by the Duke of Somerset and a war party led by Richard, Duke of York. The peace party won out, arranging the disastrous Treaty of Tours in 1444, which ceded land back to France and married Henry to the formidable Margaret of Anjou. The public was outraged. The situation worsened when Gloucester, a popular war hawk, died in 1447, and Richard of York was effectively exiled. When Somerset lost Normandy in 1450, the crown's prestige hit rock bottom. The political landscape of England had also changed. A system historians call bastard feudalism had emerged, where soldiers were loyal not to the king, but to the powerful lords who paid them. When Richard of York returned from exile in 1452, demanding Somerset's arrest, he had an army at his back. Queen Margaret's influence kept Somerset in power, but everything changed in 1453 when King Henry VI suffered a complete mental breakdown. With the king incapacitated, old rivalries exploded, particularly between the powerful Neville and Percy families, who aligned with York and Somerset, respectively. Richard of York was named Lord Protector in 1454, but his authority was short-lived. The king recovered in 1455, and a vengeful Queen Margaret had Richard exiled once more. This time, Richard wouldn't go quietly. He raised his army and marched on the king. Now in a position of power, Richard of York made his move, claiming the throne for himself. Parliament, however, brokered a compromise called the Act of Accord, which named Richard as Henry's successor. This disinherited Henry and Margaret's young son, something the Queen would never accept. She raised a massive army in the north, some 18,000 strong, and trapped Richard's much smaller force at Sandal Castle. In a reckless and ultimately fatal decision, Richard sallied out to meet them. His army was annihilated, and he was killed. But the Yorkist cause didn't die with him. It passed to his talented 18-year-old son, Edward. In early 1461, Edward won a crucial victory at Mortimer's Cross. Although his ally Warwick suffered a defeat at the Second Battle of St. Albans, Edward marched on London and was proclaimed King Edward IV. Edward IV was crowned, and with Warwick's help, he spent the next few years stamping out the last pockets of Lancastrian resistance. A peace treaty with Scotland and a series of victories forced Margaret of Anjou into exile. And in 1465, the fugitive Henry VI was finally captured. For a time, there was peace, but a rift was growing between Edward and his powerful cousin, Warwick, the Kingmaker. Edward's secret marriage to Elizabeth Woodville in 1464 and his new alliance with Burgundy undermined Warwick's influence. In 1469, Warwick rebelled, and by 1470 he had formed an unlikely alliance with his old enemy, Margaret of Anjou. They invaded England and briefly restored Henry VI to the throne. Edward fled, but he wasn't finished. He returned in 1471 with a new army. At the Battle of Barnet, thick fog caused chaos, with Lancastrian troops mistakenly attacking their own side. Warwick was killed trying to flee the field. Just a few weeks later, at the Battle of Tewkesbury, Edward's artillery and a well-timed ambush crushed Margaret's army. Her son, Prince Edward, was killed in the battle's aftermath, and Somerset was executed. Margaret was captured, and soon after, Henry VI was quietly put to death in the Tower of London. The House of York had triumphed. Yet, one Lancastrian claimant remained, Henry Tudor, living in exile with a very weak claim to the throne. After a dozen years of peace, Edward IV died suddenly in 1483, leaving his young son, Edward V, as king. But the boy king's uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, seized power, declared Edward and his brother illegitimate, and had himself crowned Richard III. The two young princes vanished in the Tower of London, a mystery that fueled unrest and opposition to Richard's rule. Henry Tudor saw his chance. An initial rebellion in 1483 failed, but with backing from the French king, he landed in Wales in 1485. At the Battle of Bosworth Field, Richard III faced Henry's army. The battle turned when the powerful Stanley family, who had remained neutral, launched a decisive flank attack against Richard. The king was killed in the thick of the fighting, and Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII on the battlefield. To unite the warring houses, he married Elizabeth of York, Edward IV's daughter. But Yorkist plots continued. In 1486, a rebellion by Lords Lovell and Stafford fizzled out. A more serious threat came in 1487, when the Earl of Lincoln championed an impostor, Lambert Simnel, who was crowned king in Ireland. At the Battle of Stoke Field, Henry VII's vanguard routed the rebels in a massacre so bloody the site was called the Red Gutter. This final brutal battle effectively ended the Wars of the Roses. The Tudors would rule England for the next century. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more historical content. This is the 3 Histories channel, and we'll see you next time.